Hello, this is Theodore, Mind Tree Exponential, Homeschooling for the 21st Century. On our last podcast, we discussed why you might be considering homeschool. Today, I'll present the 3 most likely objections that you will receive, or you may be thinking about, as you make this transition. Those 3 most common responses to the homeschooling question are, my child will lack socialization skills. Homeschooling doesn't provide socialization skills. The second one is considering the cost. How am I going to afford to homeschool my child? I already pay the taxes for the school. How am I going to get funds to do this? And the third one is parents. When I ask parents if they consider homeschooling, when I tell them that I homeschool, one of their responses most commonly is, I could never spend that much time with my kids. And those are the 3 most common objections. And we'll cover each of those and why each of those is actually a hidden opportunity. And I'll turn each of those objections into a reason why you will want to homeschool. So, back to the objections, and we'll crush them, squash them, eat them, gobble them up like frogs, as Brian Tracy might say. So, socialization. I hear, homeschool doesn't provide socialization skills. And my first point is, I went through the mass education system and a private education system. And in both cases, the peers that I was surrounded with were not the best social influence, nor was I the best social influence on those around me. And quite frankly, the idea that a whole bunch of teenagers should be stuck together to try and thwart authority is a very Lord of the Flies kind of environment, mixed with a little bit of prison structure, which creates some very unhealthy socialization. Secondly, because homeschooling parents are so often confronted with this, your kid's not learning how to socialize, homeschooling parents tend to ensure that their children get extra social interaction through opportunities that abound in the community, specifically for socializing homeschool students, which is more popular than ever. There's great opportunities. And in that case, you get to choose, or you get to have at least some choice of who your child is socializing with. Finally, and often not even considered as an answer to this objection, was one that my daughter provided me. When I asked her, are you worried that you're not socializing enough? Do you have enough friends? Do you get to spend time? And she stopped me and she said, I have enough friends and I see enough of them. And that was the end of the discussion, because it turns out that being an introvert is okay as well. Mass education systems, especially with this emphasis on teamwork, almost force extroversion on people. And that's not always the best, especially for introverts who find that counter to their most productive habits. Now we're going to go to objection number 2, is the cost of homeschooling. And indeed, if you're homeschooling out of a home, you're paying taxes and resources going to that school on a per pupil basis, $8,000 to $12,000 depending on where you are in the country. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to get access to that? Well, we don't. Some places in Colorado, for example, there's a district that offers a homeschool program where you can get access to some of those resources, but it's not exactly what you would want. However, often people have their own resources, and you have to tap into your own resources, and you have to use what you already have, and you have to leverage other resources like free material online, YouTube, and your local library has to be something you integrate, because our local library system offers incredible resources. Also, it's an investment, not a cost. The cost of letting your child continue in a unhealthy learning environment is long lasting and it will affect their entire life. So the return on any cost, which the average homeschool family only spends about $600, is very good. It's a very good investment. The earlier you choose to do this, the greater the compounding return on that cost. Also, other ways to keep the costs down are to understand that some of the costs will drop because you're not maintaining certain things that are required at school, including clothes and social this and things that your student needs to fit into the social culture of a high school. And there's other cost-saving tips, of course, but there's tons of free content which can be leveraged with simple technology that most families have, including smartphones, which are an incredible technology, which mass education systems are unable to incorporate. And indeed, they prevent them from entering the school, which is a very interesting sign about the nature of mass education. We integrate that phone because it's an amazing piece of technology. Cost of about $300 and such, plus internet, of course, but that cost, that tool alone can wipe out much of the expense of homeschooling. Now, for the third objection that I always hear with a chuckle from their parent is that, I could never homeschool my child because I couldn't spend that much time with them. Well, in the last podcast, we described a day in the life of a homeschooler, and it's meant to show the difference between mass education and homeschooling. And homeschooling is so different because it's the difference between driving a slave who's there against their will doing work they don't have any interest or say in doing versus coaching a scholar who's driven to learn what they're interested in, and you're helping them along. It's a very different process. You're not a prison guard making sure that they're doing their work, dropping the hammer on them, as I heard one person say they were going to do when they homeschooled their child. That'll just wear everybody out involved. Instead, you don't have to do that. The intrinsic motivation starts to take hold. A spark of love, of learning, turns quickly into a fire. A better analogy, though, is from the logo of our company, which is a tree. And learning is much like a tree, in that in the early years it takes a good amount of effort, a small investment up front for the tree itself, right? $300, some supplies, but you maintain it with your effort and your love and your care. And over the years, eventually, it taps into its own water system. And it really doesn't need you anymore, and it grows faster and faster in an exponential fashion. And you get to continue to help it, of course, you prune it, and it bears lots of fruit, and that is the same way with homeschooling your child. At first, there's a good amount of work, but again, since you're not waking them up to shuffle them off to some place they don't want to be, they're in a better mood. You're in a better mood. You guys can share interesting experiences together, and you get to learn together. So you can watch the Dave Poke together and laugh together. You can watch the Nova video together and learn together. And you might find the second interesting thing is that you start to like your kid, and you guys have shared interests that you can develop together, and you start working on projects together in a way that you just cannot do in the mass education school. They separate it too much. It's too separated. Home and school is separated very distinctly. But when you're homeschooled, the things that you do at home, so for instance, making breakfast can be some sort of chemistry lesson or just a lesson on home economics where you're learning how to cook. And the chemistry of cooking is a very interesting thing that many people are very interested in. There's the kids show about cooking. Young children love to learn about cooking as adults do. It's a very interesting field, and it's a science, so you can connect these things and you can benefit from them together. And finally, or actually secondly, you get to take a lot of breaks. So yeah, that one's just a real quick one. You take lots and lots of breaks and lots of naps and lots of sleep, and you're not with them all the time. You only need 4 or 5 really good hours of learning is about all the brain can handle anyway. The reason the school day is 8 or 9 hours is because they have to bus there, they have to walk here, they have to go to this lunch, and there's so much wasted time that it expands to fill an 8-hour day. But you can do most of your learning in a 4-hour day. And it's much deeper and longer lasting that way as well. And the final thing is you can do it because you have Mindtree Exponential with you. Our system teaches you exactly how to do it, how to develop your child's intrinsic motivation to learn. And it won't be long before they can direct themselves, and you're not in charge of them. You're coaching from even a greater distance. And what you find is that you'll start to want to spend more time, because the work you do with your child, because you're familiar with them and you can see some of the missed opportunities of your past education, you'll want to be with them because it's regenerative. It charges you with energy. It doesn't drain you to see your child and help your child learn. It fills you with a different kind of energy, a deep and lasting energy that helps you sleep because you're worn out, but you wake up refreshed and you're like, wow, that was challenging, but now I'm ready for round 2 because I'm stronger, just like when you exercise. So, in this episode, I've discussed 3 of the most common objections that I receive when I ask parents if they've ever considered homeschooling their child. The first one is about the socialization, or the lack of socialization skills that they develop because they're not going to a public or mass education system, school. My answer to this is that I went to the mass education system, and that socialization environment is very unhealthy, filled with peer pressure and influence of peers, which is very unnatural. We're very rarely surrounded by peers of exactly the same age. And looking to peers for how to socialize or how to properly be social is not the best quality of source for socialization skills. And finally, some people are introverts and don't want to socialize as much as the mass education system thinks they should. Homeschool parents also tend to emphasize socialization options for their children. So those 2 things kind of work together. And homeschooling actually presents a healthier socialization environment, a healthier environment in which to learn socialization skills, healthier socialization skills. The next objection that I receive is the cost. I mean, and it is a cost. $600 is not it's the very average of what a homeschool family will spend. But again, I will point out that the cost is very small in comparison to the cost of letting your child suffer through the rest of their education in a miserable way. The cost of them not learning to love and want to build their human capital, which is called education, but they want to learn. The cost of that not happening, the cost of them learning to hate education because of its oppressive nature, that's a greater cost than any cost you'll incur homeschooling, especially since there's so much free content out there. Also, I'll flip that on them and say it's not a cost, it's an investment. And quickly, as you develop your child in this homeschool system, you'll find that it's an investment that provides immediate returns to you and long-term human capital returns, which is beyond gold. It's more valuable than gold. Human capital is more valuable than gold, and you'll be producing it every day. And there's compounding returns on that investment. The third and final objection that I receive most often is a joke sometimes, but it's a painful joke that parents don't think they could spend that much time with their child. They think it would be miserable. And again, I respond that homeschooling is so different and that learning is so enjoyable when done in a healthy way that it doesn't tire you out to be with your child all day. It restores and builds you in the same way that exercise, it makes you tired, but it builds you. And so you wake up and you're more energized. Homeschooling your child and spending good quality time working on interesting and fun things that you have chosen to do together is not draining. It is the most restorative time you could ever spend. And also, you can do it because Mindtree Exponential has a 21 component system that teaches you everything you need to know, distilled into 21 concepts for learning in the 21st century. In the next episode, we'll talk about the first component, enrichment. And there I will teach you how to take books, reading, which most kids see as a pile of old vegetables, and I will teach you to use enrichment to turn it into an unlimited supply of ice cream. That's right, vegetables into ice cream. I can do it. I'll show you how. So join me next time on the Mindtree Exponential Podcast.